Before I begin, I want to take a second to say that this video is dedicated to the memory of Mantra. I hope you're resting easy, you're still loved, and we all miss you. So, Pac-Man World 2. Gotta be one of my favorite games, though at the moment I'm not sure if I like it more than World 1 or vice versa, but still, it's a game I hold in high regard. Well, for the most part. But yeah, it's a game that I love so much for how much it does right, but one aspect of it that I do find to be very interesting is its development. There's few things that we do know about it, but there's a lot that still remains a mystery. One thing I do know is that the game had a little bit of a rough and rushed production. So much content ended up being cut as a result. Pac-Man World 2 practically wears its beta content on its sleeves. Aside from screenshots online, there's also the concept art museum, the beta screenshots that appear on the back cover, and the instruction manual, all the stuff that's in the game's data, and the few oddities I've come to notice that feel telling of scrapped content and corners getting cut. Like, why does the structure look so familiar? Why is this weird bird hidden inside Pac Ranger's house? Why do they reuse the same boss 3 times? Why is the shrink pellet only used twice? And why does Wormwood inexplicably die the moment you reach the end of Ghost Bayou? Also, can't forget about those pictures from E3 2001. Every once in a while, a new piece of cut content is discovered. To think about how much of a treasure trove of secrets this game is. It basically holds more secrets than Pac-Man's Sector. World 2's elusive beta can be quite the subject when brought up. There have been 2 videos that have looked into it. Both are really good, and I'd recommend checking them out. Some of the stuff talked about there will certainly be brought up here. That said, I'm not talking about the beta as a whole, but rather I'm specifically going into what I consider the most interesting pieces of cut content for this game. The many scrapped and lost levels. Now, I do have to make some clarifications. Just because concept art displays things that aren't in the game, that doesn't necessarily mean it's cut content. Concept art is made to give out ideas of how certain things could look, or play out, and can be heavily revised during production. Of course, concept art can fall under cut content if the ideas were 100% intended for the project, but were just scrapped. It's kind of complicated and a weird middle ground to find. Like, those unused Ghost Mech boss concepts, they could just be concepts, but also it's very clear that they wanted to give each of the 4 ghosts a unique boss mech, based off the fact that Clyde, the orange ghost, had one, whereas Inky and Pinky had rehashes of the mech that Blinky, the red ghost, used. So with World 2, it can be hard to tell, but I am pretty confident that most of the things I'm about to talk about were planned to be in the game. I mean, hell, most of them have been confirmed to be. Most. That's an important distinction to make. Most. But there are some things here that are basically speculation. Speculation based off evidence, of course. But still, speculation. Okay, so enough screwing around. Now, both Bare Basics and Ice River Run are levels that made it into the game, but there are some screenshots that show different versions of these levels. This earlier version of Ice River Run has the smaller holes in the ice, and the fish enemy styles a completely different model. How much do you want to bet this older version of Ice River Run also contains the unused Yeti NPC? This older version of Bare Basics has lily pad platforms and the unused Swampfly. Okay, now let's talk about some actual lost levels. Within the museum, there is art depicting Pac-Man wearing rocket boots and a jetpack. You see there's a missile and an unnamed Pac person standing there. Actually, that could be Professor Pac in another outfit now that I think about it. And there's another piece of art depicting a ghost riding a hot air balloon. I believe these are concepts for a sky level that never made it past the drawing board. If it was made, I believe it would have played like the water levels, but with a faster pace. That said, I doubt this level made it into the prototyping stages. Then again, you never truly know. Here's another concept art depicting another possible scrapped level. This one sees Pac-Man in a hellish castle environment as he pursues Spooky, while ghosts in higher towers try to hit Pac-Man with projectiles. This could have been a concept for a final level. It actually gives me Nightcrawling vibes, so it's possible it was either inspired by the concept, or this Spooky Castle level could have been prototyped, but was sort of scrapped and reworked into Nightcrawling. Now, what's interesting is that in Pac-Man World Rally, there is a track dedicated to Spooky, known as Spooky's Castle. Now, Spooky didn't have a castle in Pac-Man World 2. Maybe he did in some unknown piece of lore, but not in the actual game. Unless he did in the early stages of World 2's development. If Spooky's Castle from World Rally really was inspired by this unused World 2 level, if not having possibly reused assets from it, then damn, that is a deep cut. I'm talking the Halberd levels in Smash Bros. Subspace Emissary being a recontextualization of the Halberd levels in Kirby GCN levels of deep cuts. Granted, there's no definitive confirmation of this, so I can't downright say it's the case. I might just be talking out of my ass, but I feel like it could be a possibility. We don't know until there's actual confirmation. The next two ones are also showcased in the museum, but these ones are very interesting as they're actually shown as fully modeled environments. One of them has Pac-Man and what I can assume is the Yeti NPC racing down a snowy mountain in inner tubes. The level seems linear. Any bit of actual level design doesn't seem to be apparent, so it's probably in its early stages here. Obviously the environment went unused, but the textures match the ones used in the snow levels in the final game. It looked like it could have been a fun level, but it's evident that this is what would eventually evolve into the iconic Blade Mountain. Not much more to say than that. This, however, isn't the last we see of the inner tube, as it's present in another cut level before being sent into the spectral void. The level shows Pac-Man inside the inner tube, floating on top of some water as he is confronted by a big-ass serpent. Given the intimidating nature of the snake, it would be fair to assume that this is a boss. I have no idea how this would have played out, but it is very interesting. The environment and the textures definitely went unused. As for what the environment is, well, it's very darkly lit, so it's hard to make the textures out. One could assume that it is some kind of cave. Could it be connected to the water world? Maybe. One of the concept arts that show Pac-Land and Ghost Island shows what appears to be an underwater cave underneath Pac-Land, which is a very particular detail. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, because it is just concept art, but it could be connected to the scrapped level, assuming it takes place in a cave. I do, however, have a different idea of what this location could be, but before I talk about that, I want to go over another really cool scrapped level, that being Pac Village. Now, I know what you're thinking right about now, but Newman, Pac Village is in the game, you fucking idiot. And you're right, it is in the game. The compromised version, anyway. In an interview with one of the game's artists, Pete Conlon, who was interviewed by a good friend of mine, Jackie Xcoy, it was mentioned that Pac Village was going to be a lot bigger.
Yeah, we that level was considered the hub, and we were going to I forget. I'm sorry, it's been so many years, but we were going to return to that level and get more information, and you would send you back out into the world. But I think we ended up using a map instead.
Interesting.
That village was much bigger at first, but we had to sort of shrink it down and condense it because of the game engine wasn't
I see.
a big free roaming level. We needed lots of walls, and we needed to keep the camera from seeing too far into the distance because it would crash.
This is yet another video I'd recommend watching the entirety of. it's very insightful to some aspects of World 2's development. So, to sort of regurgitate what Pete mentioned in that clip, Pac Village was meant to be a full-on homeworld that you would regularly revisit throughout your adventure. It would serve as the gateway to various levels you would go to. Unfortunately, it had to be cut down due to limitations with the engine. It honestly seems like this is the reason as to why so many pieces of content got removed. This little bit of information kinda gives us insight into what may have been the game's original vision. But I'm saving that discussion for another day. It is worth noting that Pac Village had many different looks on the concept stages, as seen with these concept arts done by Pete Conlon, one of them being a gothic-looking setting. I'm not even sure if this was intended as a Pac Village concept. As it appears, Pac Village was seemingly initially envisioned as a bustling Pac town. Kinda reminds me of the mini-cities from the past games like Pac-Land and Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures. Alright, so you're gonna have to bear with me on this next one, as this particular lost level is actually pretty much speculation. As of now, there isn't any 100% confirmation that this existed at some point. That said, I feel that there is some pretty good evidence as to it existing at some point in development. You know how earlier I mentioned that World 2 had certain oddities about it that felt emblematic of rushed development and cut content? Well, I and some others have noticed some oddities that could relate to a scrapped underwater base level. The first bit of evidence I'd like to bring up are the Galaxian mazes present in the water world. A common thing with Galaxian stages in the first two Pac-Man World games is that the Galaxian stages are representative of not just the world, but the specific level that they are in. For example, Pac-Dot Pond, being a level where water is a primary aspect of the level design, has a Galaxian maze that takes place in the middle of a river of water. Blight Mountain, being a level where Pac-Man ice skates, has the Galaxian maze where Pac-Man ice skates, just like he does in the actual level. Yeah, you get the idea. So in levels like Scuba Duba and Shark Attack, you'd think that the Galaxian maze for that would be some sort of underwater maze, right? Well, no. It's just a random aquatic facility. These textures and assets are also used in the cutscenes that precede both Yellow Pac-Marine and Mega Whale Sub. So not only does it not make any sense that these mazes don't match up with the core idea of the levels they're in, it just doesn't seem like they would go through the effort of creating these assets, models, and textures only to just use them in the optional bonus mazes and cutscenes that last a few seconds long, as opposed to using them in an actual level. So either these mazes were designed for an underwater base level, or they, as well as the cutscenes with Professor Pac, were made as a means of salvaging the level's aesthetics after it was scrapped. Another piece of evidence to its existence is the level Shark Attack, with how thrown together and last minute it feels. With the levels on World 2, there's an attempt to differentiate each and every one of the levels, whether or not it's through having different mechanics, gimmicks, hazards, enemy types, a unique style of play, a unique central idea, or simply just having unique layouts and structures that set it apart. This is the case for every level, except Shark Attack. This one is just Scuba Duba, with one new hazard and cheaper design. It feels like Shark Attack and possibly Yellow Pac-Marine were stand-ins for platforming levels that were scrapped. I mean, I don't think they were planning to use Yellow Pac-Marine for a full level and not just a boss fight. I mean, the developers weren't that cruel, right? Right? So the way I think the water world would have originally planned out would be that you would start off swimming until you reach the underwater base, go through it for a level or two, then you hop in the Yellow Pac-Marine and fight the Mega Whale. Could have made for a dynamic set of levels. But again, this is just theorizing. There's some other evidence, like this unused electrical current, otherwise known as Electric Frontier. Okay, so I'm well aware that night crawling was meant to have this as a hazard, but World 2 has mechanics that recur throughout parts of the game. Not to mention, electrical hazards seem like something you'd find in a man-made environment, like an underwater base. Just look at Jak and Daxter, for example. And my last bit of evidence takes us back to the snake level I talked about beforehand. Previously, I mentioned that the environment itself is darkly lit, so it's hard to tell. One could assume it's a cave. However, someone could also assume it's a more metallic environment. It could be a section of the supposed underwater base. I can imagine a scenario playing out where the ghosts trap Pac-Man in this room and he has to deal with this snake. Okay, so those last 2 points are kind of flimsy, but I do think that overall the signs do point to the existence of this scrapped level, especially when you look at the mazes. Alright, before I go into the last 2, which are very interesting by the way, how about I mention some smaller stuff? It's always been particular to me as to how there were only 2 instances where the shrink pellet was used. It would be fair to assume that there were more sections that would have used it that never ended up making the cut. I also can't forget this earlier version of Blade Mountain where Pac-Man's skates are black instead of red. It's absolutely not significant in the slightest, but it's something. And lastly, there's the playable title screen.
Alright, thank you for stopping by. Bye, Pac-Man.
Bye, Pac-Man.
I just died in the map screen.
SR. From Daxton SR in...
Oh my god! What was that?
What?
I'm on the title screen. Oh my god.
You what?
Yep, it's a thing! Okay, so I'm pretty sure this was never meant to be a level, but it's certainly something I thought was funny. It also inspired a weird dream I had once, but I'll save that for another time. And with that, we have 2 more levels to discuss. And I saved the best ones for last. Let's talk about Frog Pond. Frog Pond has got to be one of the most fascinating pieces of Pac-Man World 2 cut content, given that it's one of the few, if not the only cut level, to actually be playable in a public appearance, as you can see from these photos of Pac-Man World 2's demo booth at E3 2001. And on that note, it's really crazy to me how to this day, no footage of this demo has surfaced. Was no one allowed to record it? Or did nobody care? Whatever. There is a decent amount to unpack here, from photos and concept art to things in the game's files, and even the final product that make references to it, and possibly even references in other games. Starting off with some pictures, of course there's the pic of the booth, but also these 2 screenshots that show off environments that line up with the environment that's shown in this demo. This has the implication that this purple ape NPC would have been a part of the level. This screenshot that features a purple ghost has these trees and rocks that resembles the ones in the concept art. Going back to the E3 2001 photo, you may notice this render depicting Pac-Man traversing a forest with mushroom houses. It's a bit more darker, so to speak, but it does fit in with the aesthetic shown in the concept art, which does also feature mushrooms as a particular aesthetic. The concept art also has interesting little details like this door-looking thing, and this fisherman's hut. I just gotta say, I love the designs here, just the colors and everything. Again, it's concept art. Who knows how good it would have looked in the end? These are all we have to go by. World 2 certainly does have a great in-game art direction though. I should also mention that this art piece that shows off ideas they had for the different areas, most of these being in the final game. But look! It's a frog! In a pond! Yeah, it's very clear this level had quite the presence in the early days of World 2's development. but it carries that presence after it was scrapped for whatever reason. In the files, there are frog NPCs. Said frogs are also used in the icon that represents the level. It's very likely that the grassland levels were reworks of the foundation that was set by Frog Pond, with the lily pad platforms and the swampfly enemies and the beta screenshots feeling like lost remnants of this level. Some of the layout in Packed Up Pond sort of resembles what they were going for with the layout of one of the two concept arts. And of course, we have the Killer Frog, the boss of the first area, and it's a mechanical frog. Pretty fitting for the first area, but even more fitting for the scrapped level considering the whole frog theme. This once more leads us into Pac-Man World Rally, which has a level that may or may not have been inspired by Frog Pond. Winding Wetlands could very well be the successor to Frog Pond. There's just too many coincidences for it to not have some sort of connection. Its aesthetic feels reminiscent to what's seen in the concept art and E3 photos, with it being watery and woodland, and there's also the contents within the map. This fisherman hut matches with the one seen in the concept art, and then you have the various NPCs in the map that match up with the unused World 2 NPCs, like these gators, these swamp flies, and most of all, these big-ass frogs. Of course, these are all heavily redesigned, but the resemblance is there, especially with the frogs. It's just really interesting comparing Winding Wetlands with the Frog Pond concepts. Really makes me wonder what possible other contents in World Rally were inspired by unused ideas from the Pac-Man World trilogy. But yeah, on the subject of Frog Pond, oh boy, there's just a lot to this one scrapped level. It's so interesting how much of a presence this scrapped level has. During World 2's development, after World 2's development, and even going into other games. Oh wait, I almost forgot to mention, Pac-Man All-Stars also featured a level called The Creepy Forest that looked eerily a lot like Frog Pond. Given World 2 was in development when All-Stars was made, they could have possibly shared ideas in concept art. Or maybe this is just one big coincidence. You know, at this point, I'd probably look at any forest type environment and just think, oh my god! Frog Pond! And now we end this off with what may as well be the most mysterious cult level, Pac-Atraz.
Relax, pretty boy. You'll be back in Pac-Atraz before you know it.
Pac-Atraz is a level in which it all feels like a contrast to the final game we are familiar with, and feels like a window into a different realization of World 2. A game much different in its early days. It's a level we don't know much about, but what little bits we do have about it are very interesting. The first thing I ever saw related to this environment was this concept art made by Pete Conlon depicting a Gothic town location. When I first saw this, I assumed it was a concept for Pac Village. That was until Crazy Otto resurfaced this preliminary animation made by JJ Ronda. There's actually a description from the creator to go along with this. It reads,
"These animations were generally short game proposal presentation pieces I would be asked to quickly create. Milestone marker pieces to show management. Some character animations to give viewers an idea of how the game was progressing. So I would do these pieces and would always put a lot more work into the animation than what was expected or asked of me to do."
And they sure did put a lot of work into this. This is a really nicely done animation, and I love the little attention to details. Like how Pac-Man pushes a few Pac Dots out of the way to catch up with the trolley, to which he rides on and eats more Pac Dots along the way. The environment is just really cool to me. It's much more urban and gritty, and you would think Pac-Man would be out of place here, but he weirdly enough fits, in a way I can't explain. It just looks cool seeing him in this environment. I should go ahead and mention that the reason I refer to this unnamed level as Pac-Atraz is because the trolley carts have the name Pac-Atraz Island on them, alongside Ghostland, which suggests this was a part of the Ghost Island. The interesting thing about this is that a location called Pac-Man has been referenced in the series before, particularly being name-dropped in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Either this was a coincidence or a deep cut, like an attempt to adapt and explore ideas from that old cartoon. But we really don't know. There's a lot we don't know, actually. This answers a few questions, but also creates more. Like, what were they going for here? And how far were they able to go? It's one thing for an unused idea to exist as a concept art, but to also have been fully modeled and used in animation is another. And it's fair to assume that this was intended to be an environment you were set to explore that just happened to not make it into the game. And I wonder if it ever reached a playable state. With Pac-Man being as elusive as it is, I figured that would be a perfect way to end off this subject. World 2's behind the scenes have quite the ambiguity to them, yet are weirdly evident at the same time. World 2's beta and its many cut levels and concepts have been a major fascination of mine ever since I unlocked that art gallery in Pac Village and saw all those unfamiliar characters and settings. The fascination grew further with discovering those pictures on the internet. The same applies to Pac-Man World 1 and 3, and really basically any childhood game of mine. It's hard to put into words, really, but if I were to try to explain, really it's that fascination of a game you've played for years, having characters or levels that were supposed to be there, but ended up not being there. A very surreal aspect of these games, almost as if there's extra content. Still to this day, I have that desire to see the World 2 E3 2001 build in action, whether the build becomes publicized or old footage simply resurfaces. I remember when I first found World 1's beta footage and how crazy it was. The upload I made of it is one of my most viewed videos on this channel, and for good reason. But I haven't had the same luck with World 2. But never say never, as it can always turn up. I just feel that there needs to be more of a unified effort. Anyways, World 2 is definitely an ambitious game that had a lot more planned for it. It is understandable why certain things were cut, especially given the development circumstances as well as being multi-platform. But it's also understandable to wish some of these cool levels and contents made it into the game. Still though, at the end of the day, the Pac-Man World 2 we got is still a damn great game. Tightly designed, utilizes Pac-Man-like elements in a platformer setting in great ways, fun and memorable levels, a fantastic soundtrack, and one of the most memorable villains in the series, even if they didn't do much with him until the very end, mind you. As always when it comes to cut content and canceled games, the pure knowledge of them is great to have, as they can still provide great inspirations for fanworks. World 2's unused ideas definitely applies to this. I already see certain fan games taking them into account. There's also the question about the inevitable Pac-Man World 2 repack. I can't really say for sure. I'd say keep your expectations in check, as Pac-Man World 1 also had its fair share of cut levels, and none of them made it into repack. At the same time, however, repack did remake the Chrome Keeper fight in the image of its concept art version, so it's all fair possibility. Maybe not entire levels, but I can see an expanded Pac Village akin to the one that was originally planned, and maybe some of the boss concepts getting revived. Maybe we'll see this purple guy again, but again, we'll have to wait and see. Honestly, I think both World 1 and 2 have so many cut concepts that you could make an entire new game with them. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Some of what I discussed here is speculation, mainly the whole thing about the underwater base level. So if by any chance a developer who worked on World 2 is watching this, well, first of all, hi! And second, if there is anything I got wrong in this video, be sure to let me know! Special shout out to Mantra TV and Crazy Otto, as well as McKitty for having documented many of the game's cut content, especially with stuff like Frog Pond. I also want to give a shout out to Mario Fan 123311 for helping me out in certain areas and even drawing the parallels between Frog Pond and Winding Wetlands. Special shout out to Johnny for contributing some voiceover lines for this video. And also special shout out to Pete Conlon and Jackie Xcoy. This certainly was a fun subject to tackle. However, next time we will be taking on a subject that is somewhat fun, but mostly aggravating, and it involves a shitty company that happens to be an agitator of a horrible legal situation that has been plaguing the franchise for some time. But for now, I gotta pack it up. And until then, I will see you all tomorrow. Yeah! I'll see you all tomorrow.
Hi, it's me. Managed to make a completely automated, fully working Pac-Man World 2 randomizer. That's it. Okay, wait, what the fuck is going on? Oh my goodness. What the hell is going on? Where's Pinky? There's Pinky. Okay. If you charge a full revel, you won't fall off. It'll feel like you will. And your anxiety will probably get really high. But you'll be fine. And then do a revel from here. Or just walk. Either way works. And this part makes me cringe every single time. Slayer, you're great. But don't do this. Why did I do that? Damn it. I could have just went back to the main platform. Or kind of just learn new things about runs you may not have known before. I hope that this really does help people. It took me fucking 6.5 hours to do. But, I'm glad I did. Now I just need to edit this. Oh god.